if we talk about Anthony Joshua for a moment, he's looked for new trainers, he's looked for new methods, he's looked for a new way to win. Can he change enough to change the result?
I mean, that's a great question. And, you know, when great fighters have lost in the past, have they always thought that the solution to a problem lies with another coach? I think it's a really interesting thing that's going on with Joshua behind the scenes at the moment. And I do think it's important, obviously, to address the Usyk thing, because it kind of puts everything into perspective, doesn't it? You know, it really does, in terms of us being here discussing heavyweight boxing. And obviously, you couldn't have any more respect for Usyk doing what he's doing now. It's just, obviously, you know, with regards to Joshua, is he going to be fighting for a long period of time, or is he not going to be fighting for a long period of time, should I say? Because, you know, there's no telling when everything's, you know, going to be resolved. So it's a huge question mark. And we kind of thought when Dylan was delayed putting pen to paper on this contract and took it to the last possible moment, we kind of assumed and took it for granted that all the rest of the pieces of the heavyweight puzzle would slot into place. And, you know, kind of that piece is fitted, but now obviously everything else is all over the show, and it's obviously through no one's fault in boxing. And I mean, in answer to your question, it maybe gives Joshua a bit more time to spend with his new coach, if that's the way that he goes, and prepares for Usyk, who's obviously not going to have his mind on the job now and not going to be training, and, you know, and is doing what he's doing. Hard to answer the question, but I think, you know, Joshua was with one of the good minds in British boxing and in boxing worldwide with Rob McCracken, and, you know, I'm not sure that Rob wouldn't have had the answers for Usyk in a rematch, but you know, Joshua will do what he chooses to do, and hopefully, obviously, we can get that fight and everything be resolved sooner rather than later.
Tactically, it was really wrong, and everybody could see that. So I don't know I think there's always been a criticism towards Anthony Joshua. There's too many voices in the corner and too many, I suppose, hanger-oners or whatever you want to call them. But it never seems like there's one voice that he's listening to and one coach, which I always think is important. It's okay to take little bits of opinions and wisdom from other people, but there needs to be one definitive plan. And whoever came up with a game plan in the last fight to try and outbox the master boxer in Usyk, it's just baffling to me.
To Joshua's credit, he seems to be very hungry for knowledge, doesn't he? So he's always looking for advice and always looking for different people to pick their brains and all the rest of it. But like you said, ultimately it's got to come down to one voice. You can't just take necessarily bits from different people and try and thread it all together to create, you know, a winning game plan. It's got, you know, you need to be clear and concise about what you're trying to achieve in the ring on the night.
Yeah, and I think it's also down to the fighter on the night of keeping the discipline to stick to what's in your head. Now, I know we tried to outbox Usyk, but that may not have been the plan for the whole of the fight, because I just thought Usyk stunned him early enough to get his respect, and it might have just made him think twice about trying to hustle and, you know, bustle in and get them short, heavy shots off that heavy artillery, throws up close. But on the outside looking in, it was like, why are you trying to outbox the master boxer? It was like, is it an ego thing? You want to prove you're the best boxer in the world, pound for pound. The thing is, with getting the new trainer, it's going back to what I was saying about Tyson Fury being able to fight dirty. I think Oleksandr Usyk, Anthony Joshua, yourself, Carl, me, yourself, maybe not so much yourself because of your dad and your family, the way you train. We're classically trained textbook boxers from the Olympic School of Boxing. I think Oleksandr Usyk can beat anyone who's trained in that capacity, and that's Anthony Joshua. You know, he's had it drilled into him year after year after year. It's textbook boxing. I think it's going to take someone with more dimensions than that to beat Oleksandr Usyk, if you know what I mean. Just a little bit different, something a bit different from what he is going to expect, and that's why I just think, even if he does train now, he's still going to struggle.
Not that he's an old dog, but, you know, is this a situation you can't teach an old dog new tricks? He's probably the youngest person ever to be called an old dog, Anthony Joshua. But do you think that he's sort of met his match there? I
believe the solution doesn't lie with a new trainer. I don't believe it lies with anyone. I think if all Joshua needed to do, in my opinion, to win that fight, and in, you know, our whole team's opinion to win that fight, is, you know, Usyk's obviously a cruiserweight. He's coming up from cruiserweight. He's a smaller man. He's not a gigantic man. you're a 6'6" dinosaur, 18.5 stone, whatever. Get your hands up around your face, go forward, and bulldoze him.
Be a brute, yeah.
That's all he had to do to win that fight.
That, yeah.
And I believe if he did do that, he would have won. And in this second fight, if Joshua doesn't need new trainers and all this sort of stuff, get your hands up around your face and use your tactics. You're not a boxer. He's not a boxer. He's a powerhouse. Go forward and try and get him out of there. And I do believe 6, 7, 8 rounds down the way, if Joshua's got the gas tank for that, I don't really know. I do believe Usyk will start feeling it. I do believe he'll get Usyk out of there late on if he applies them tactics. He doesn't need to try and do all these things. He needs to go forward and put it on him. Because he's the bigger man, he's the heavier man, he's the stronger man. So use your attributes and just go forward. And there's no need for new trainers or any of that. Just have the balls, and just get straight into him. That's all he has to do to win that fight, in my opinion.
Tris, you mentioned like the thirst for knowledge, but can that almost manifest itself as a bit of an identity crisis? Tommy's talking about getting your hands up and doing what he's best at.
Obviously, doing it
with
clever.
tactics,
I'm
with
saying
tactics,
you can't just
right?
put your hands up and walk to the man because you'll get KO'd. But apply the pressure smartly. In that sort of sense.
Well, I think you're right, and I think we've seen different versions of Joshua in different fights. Against Pulev, he was sort of more jabbing and moving and offensive with counters, and then we've also seen him go and try and have it out with fighters in exciting fights. So, and I think that there might be a bit of an identity crisis in there in terms of him not knowing really where he's at as a fighter. And I think, part of what he's looking for, I think, is that identity. And, what is he? Is he a big, upright, stand-up, classically styled textbook guy? Or is he going to develop into something, where there's a bit more finesse and maybe a bit more of an American influence, where you're more comfortable in close and working under pressure, or applying more pressure, in terms of getting in closer? I think that's a great question. I think that's something that he is wanting to find out. That's certainly how it comes across in interviews. Like, he kind of wants to find what he is as a fighter, and I'm not sure that his evolution has allowed him to discover that just yet.
I think it was really interesting when there was a few fights ago when he brought Angel Fernandez into his team, who's typically like a Cuban style, Mexican, South American type style of fighting, and wasn't sure if it was going to suit AJ or not, but it was. I suppose we're talking about him almost being a little bit confused as to what style he actually is, and I think he knows deep down now what style beats Usyk, and he has to apply that. I think all the boys touched on it here, that I don't even know if it's about changing trainers, but having one voice that you can listen to is very, very important. He knows what he has to do to win the fight, but whether or not he can do it, that's a different thing.
Was the second loss more damaging than the first? Because the first can happen, right? The second suggests that there's something wrong. And from your experience, did your losses affect you in different ways?
Yeah, the first one really hurt. The first one was a rematch, so my loss, I'd already beaten Santa Cruz the first fight. I lost the next time. And it was your first defeat of your career, and you sense things changing a little bit, and a wee bit of a cliche with the phone stops ringing and stuff. As much as it happened to me, so it was hard to get over that, really. The Warrington fight, again, that was a loss that hurt me bad because I felt like I really got it wrong, and although Josh, I lost the fight, I felt like it was down to my own performance rather than anything else, really. And then the last loss just finished my career, but I knew that was always going to be it. If I lost one more time, I was packing it in. So they all affected me different ways, I suppose, a little bit, but they all hurt.
Have you seen a way that he's reacted to that second loss that was different from the first one? I think the first time he was very much sort of open to facing it and trying to kind of be fine with it.
Yeah.
But I guess sometimes it's not easy to actually be that way inside.
Yeah, well, it hurt him massively, didn't it? But the same as this situation, he had the chance to right the wrong straight away, and that's like, a relief as a fighter. But actually going and doing it's a different thing. So he done it with Ruiz, and he done the boxing, the classic stand-up boxing, brilliantly, stood Ruiz on his head. But after the first fight, for my own experience, it's like, okay, I've lost, it's one loss. It was a bit of a, it can happen. I've had a bad day at the office, but when you're having more than one bad day at the office, that's when you do start asking more questions. And I think he is muddying the waters a little bit by trying to find the answer when he's probably already got the answer himself to at least do better against Usyk. I just don't think style-wise he's going to beat Usyk. So I don't want to say he's got the answer to beat him. I just think to make it a bit of a closer fight, a bit of a harder night for Usyk. But I just think the second fight he seems to have a little bit more anger about it. He took a little bit more seriously in the months after it. You know, he just seems to have a bit between the teeth.
I think the difference between the losses were with Andy Ruiz when he suffered that defeat. I think people saw that as a bit of a Lennox Lewis, Hassie Rackman, or Lennox Lewis, Oliver McCall blip. And then it was almost like, look, let's get them back together and we'll right the wrong. And with Usyk, I think, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if the bookmakers have Joshua as the underdog going into the rematch. You know, against Ruiz, I think people were still thinking, oh, Joshua, you know, he'll get his head together and he'll put it right. Against Usyk, it's not such a foregone conclusion.